You all ready?
I got two exactly the same bills.
Okay, I'd like to call to order our public safety meeting for November 26, 2019. Roll call.
Counselor Gibbs?
Here.
Counselor Ensel?
Here.
Mayor Reed?
Here.
Counselor Armstrong?
Here?
Counselor Kelly?
Here.
Counselor McFarland?
Here.
Counselor Moore?
Here.
Okay, item 1, reports from department representatives and discussion with counselors. Would department heads like to come forward and share some reports? Anybody?
What would you like to hear?
I don't know, anything you want to share? Well, you did give me the report. Is that something that you can share now?
If you want to talk generally about
Yeah.
it,
Yeah, because I don't think the rest of the council knows that I received this, right? You said you were going to ask for.
Yes, I only gave it to you. I'll submit it to the mayor's office for distribution.
Okay, so why don't you share that with the council?
So, quite some time ago, Councilor Gibbs had asked for a report on the, just an analysis, at least for what I could do, and in cooperation with the school district on how the school resource officer program is functioning. So I wanted to make sure that it was done in a way that I could articulate it with some actual feedback. And what I've received is that at least at the administrative level in each of the buildings, there's some very, very good feedback about how this SRO program is working. So I included in this summary report some of the responses and detailed, based on what their usage of the school resource officers is within their individual buildings, because like we discussed, it varies differently from the high school to elementary schools. They're utilized differently. So a lot of functions that maybe don't rise to the top in a typical conversation about what they might do, but they're utilized in a lot of different ways. All positive, I would see from the feedback that I received.
Okay.
Does this constitute the report that Elizabeth was looking for?
Yes. Does anybody have any questions for Chief Ritter, since he's brought that up?
How are they utilized exactly?
So, this is where I would speak very generally
Sure.
and not get into operations. In the report, it talks about how they're utilized more as a positive figure, a mentor, a liaison, a non-confrontational figure, a person that has established trust within the buildings, and that's within the students, the faculty, and staff. They sit on the safety boards for all of the school buildings, and there's a district safety plan. They offer advice based on their expertise as police officers in a previous capacity.
Has there been any instances, Chief, where they may have helped to quell any?
It's not articulated in specifics, but there is a general sense that is a role that they do serve in.
General conflict resolution?
Yeah, that's a great term to use. In the non-typical or traditional police manner where, dressed as I am,
Right.
I elicit a certain feeling when somebody is, dealing with me.
I'm in trouble.
Exactly.
You have us quivering up here.
But this is a very, traditional response that the feedback that I get from that is that's not how they're received in those
Perceived,
buildings.
yeah.
Picturing a lot of Brad Millers.
I would say Maybe. I don't want to degrade what Brad Miller does. Yeah, I mean, a lighter version.
Establishing a rapport. And
Yes, I mean, a person dressed as I am is going to, they're responding to a problem, they're fixing a problem, and they're moving on. Whereas sitting down at lunch with students and talking to them about what is going on in their day and troubles that they're having with different teachers, or at home, you know, I mean, it goes a lot deeper than me going to stop a disturbance. Like, they're trying to talk to students and facilitate the objectives of the school administration as well, in a way that doesn't derail the objectives of the school administration.
Okay. Any other questions for him?
No, it seems generally it's an integrated approach rather than an us and them sort of mentality.
You know, I mean, that's what I always believed, but, you know, seeing it in written form from the people that do it day to day, it gave me a good sense that that is what is happening there.
I don't know, I'll read the report.
Yeah, yes.
So, excuse me, this is going to be our last public safety meeting before the end of the year, because Christmas is at the end of next month. So we talked earlier about the nuisance animal control officer, and so we talked a little bit about that. Still need to get some more reports
and
from him,
I'm
and
still in the process of getting the remaining reports.
and because in January, we're gonna have the recommendation as to whether or not to renew that particular individual's contract. We also talked about the trap neuter release group, which doesn't really fall under
No, but I
your
mean,
oversight, but we did talk about that, and that we need more, we need reports from them as well, and that's not, like I said, that's not your oversight, but we did talk about that. And we did have some questions about, were you in that meeting? Or were you in the meeting when we were talking about the trap? You were in the meeting, we were talking about the trap neuter release. Do you wanna, share the question that you had specifically about?
Well, I was just curious if, in the wake of our recently passed law, I know that trap, neuter, and release people said that it
Thank you.
prohibited them from performing their duties, and that they were concerned that they wouldn't be able to continue to do their work. And I think we all agreed that that wasn't the case. But we were just wondering if they indeed are still doing their work, or if they've stopped.
I haven't heard anything from
Trap neuter.
The trap, neuter, and release.
They released a report in October that was attached to our
Didn't see it.
meeting agendas, and they have trapped, neutered, released, or adopted in the hundreds of
Was that
cats so
before,
far
was
this
that
year.
prior to the legislation, though?
No, that was,
No, it would've been
that
after.
It was after?
the
Okay.
quarterly report that was for the third quarter that finished September 30th, so.
So that would have been prior to our adopting the new legislation.
No, it would have been
The
after.
report, but the work would have been
Oh, yeah.
prior
The
to.
PNR work would have
Right.
been done, yeah,
Prior to.
before, yes.
So I've asked for an update for December,
Okay.
so we
Great.
can see what kind of activity they're doing.
Okay. And also saw in our regular reports, the parking enforcement. Anything you want to add to that or share about the parking enforcement report?
Just that, we're remaining in a status quo situation until further developments with a paid parking system, or whatever is going to transpire.
I'd be interested to see if she notices a decrease or any sort of reaction to tickets along the Court Street corridor, considering the county's new layout of their parking lot.
And I think we need to finish our agreement with the county to figure out how we're going to be enforcing the county city lot itself.
That is also included in what was, not the paid parking, but transitioning into something other than what we're currently pursuing.
Any other updates from department heads you want to share with council?
I can tell you that the program I developed for driver qualifications, it was going to decrease over time as processed 7 new drivers. So that's significant. It's something we're doing as a standardization for our department, so everybody's getting the same training. So that's been in play. That was a development on the last one.
Excellent.
Supervisor McMahon, anything you want to share with the council in your report?
Well, I'll speak to the rental registration program if you like.
Yeah, that would be great.
We've worked it and reworked it again. I think we've got it exactly where we want it as far as the essence of what we wanted to do and who we want to capture in this. We've sorted out the cost and the revenue, and I think Rich has those numbers incorporated already. Any questions on where we're at with that? I mean, it's still a work in progress. Once we get it approved, there's gonna be some challenges we're gonna have to overcome, like hiring people, and as Councilor Kelly said, making sure that we stagger these so we're not inundated and all in one year that we can't keep up. So those challenges are to come, but we're confident that we can make it work.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Good
Any other questions?
Thank you for your work on
No,
this.
thank you.
Sure.
Excellent.
And Richard as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Go back to sleep.
Okay, agenda item number 2. I would entertain a motion to move these items to the agenda tonight.
So moved.
Okay. I'll second that.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Renzel?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
Okay. Number 3, any old business? I don't
I
have any.
have an update from last week. I mentioned that the recreation facilities, regional recreation facilities are being discussed by the YMCA and other groups, and the city is obviously participating in that along with the county and other entities. I said at that time that they're hoping to fund a study to explore where an ideal location would be. Followed, Councilor Armstrong, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've been going to the same meetings as I have too, followed by another set of design work to see what the complex would actually look like once they figure out a location and demand. And then presumably after that, some sort of capital campaign to do the modifications necessary depending on what they decide. So if I recall correctly, that first study was going to cost $32,000 and gauge whether there's sufficient interest in the community to support a recreation complex. And we probably would imagine that there is, given that we already have 3 of them, one sponsored by the city, one by the YMCA, and one by the Wellness Center, as well as other private entities. They'd asked for the city to contribute, and my position was I'd ask you all to contribute to the extent that other municipalities also contribute as well. On a pro rata basis, we're the largest municipality, so we'd obviously be willing to, I'd recommend contributing a little bit more, but that the county also contributes. At that time I said that, if you recall, we decided not to pursue the USS Saratoga replica. So we do have a $15,000 grant coming from the county for that. I suggested we repurpose that grant to also contribute to this, but since then,
The
Melena.
entire amount? Or
Well,
a portion of it?
I had suggested at that time at the entire amount, but since then, Melena Tamer and our planner had informed me that she'd been discussing with Rodney Brown at the county other options for that $15,000 grant. So if that's the case, I wouldn't want to cut short her discussions, current discussions with the county. They all are similar types of uses, and Ethan may know some about this if I get anything wrong, but similar types as the USS Saratoga, you know, playground, kids' activities, park-like things. I think she had 3 different options she was exploring. So I wouldn't want to, since those conversations are already going, I wouldn't want to short circuit that. Instead, we might ask the county if they might have another set of $15,000 to contribute. So, but this is ultimately though a council decision, so I just wanted to give you the complete picture. I didn't know about those competing potential uses for the USS Saratoga grant when I'd discussed that with you last week.
Probably, I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, I've been in on this, so it's easier for me to digest all of this information, but perhaps, just a kind of like written report out of all of our options concerning this and what kinds of contributions we might be asked to make would inform the council a little bit better. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
They're
And I
looking,
can, work with you on that.
sure, they're looking for $32,000, if I recall correctly, for the initial study.
Mhm.
So they felt that if the county had $15,000 either from some other source or redirected grant money, and the city put in about 5,000, their math was that they're already about 2/3 of the way to
Right.
having the study
The
funded.
town's also involved in the conversation, so they would be a stakeholder.
So that's about where it stands. I sense that the YMCA is very anxious and had a sense of urgency to get this off the ground. But, on the other hand, we're not the only participant in this either, so.
Well, let's make it our goal to firm all that information up and do the proper, lines of communication and get a set proposal to recommend maybe for next week. How about that?
Because next week, governance, so I might just ask your committee to
Okay.
take care of that.
All right.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. Me, that can't, how did that happen? I don't know. I'm flying.
Okay, any other old business? Okay, on to new business, any new business?
I have something, and I don't know if it should fall under public safety or where. I was approached by someone at the university, and I guess there has been a request to have some no parking signs put up on Park Avenue between Olivetti.
Traffic designation for tonight.
What's that, Beth?
Your report, that's what you were voting on tonight, your traffic designation.
From Melinda Tamer.
I don't have the,
No, we got it on Tuesday. What's it, Tuesday, Monday?
Good, Ida.
Beth, where am I gonna miss that?
7A, I think.
No, it's not that one.
This was, and I know a little bit about it because, I want to pass it down. Because I've seen the various different angles of this. The police have a set of concerns, DPW has a set of concerns over this. Our planner went and researched and made a proposal. From what I understand, there's kind of a no person's land for parking. It's not exactly clear whether parking is or isn't allowed in about a 200-foot spot on Park Avenue. So this better signage would help clarify what I believe the current understanding is. So nobody is caught up in that gray area.
so I guess there will be signs and will go up, will be going up. Okay, that's the question that was asked of me.
Yeah.
It was asked of me the end of last week. Because they said they hadn't heard anything, that's why they asked me. That's fine, that's great, thank you.
Any other new business?
I just had one thing, it had been brought to my attention that, wondering if we are ticketing cars that are parked on the roadway, because Public Works has a difficult time pushing those banks back where people, I notice it especially on Oak Street, where people are parked across the lines and you have to go change lanes to get around. And Public Works said that they cannot push those banks back. We dodged a bullet in that everything melted, but as that builds up and they don't have a chance to push it back, if cars are parking where the banks need to be pushed back, it's causing a problem with Public Works being able to clear those lanes out. So I would hope that we could, you know, ensure that people, because they are parked right on the pavement, you know, where cars are supposed to be driving. And Public Works can't do anything about it because those cars are there guarding the bank. They can't push them back. So I guess it's a problem that occurs periodically during the winter time, and I hope we could clear those cars out so we can push the banks back, the Public Works people.
I know Mike Bassett's been pushing for, in the parking committee for some sort of, he would like a flat out parking ban during the winter, but there's been talks of alternate side parking at certain times and stuff like that, which I think could help with that too.
Yeah, because they have a very difficult time keeping the snow pushed back. After the initial period is just one evening, or sometimes 2 evenings, and it's not enough for the Public Works to be able to clear the roads properly. So we maybe need to look at something even further than that.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think the DPW and our chief coordinated and discussed the level of enforcement for that first snowfall. And if I recall, DPW wanted some enforcement ticketing, and I think we gave out 50 tickets that evening. But they didn't, given the suddenness of that very first snowfall and so early in the season, I don't think they're recommending towing. And as you know, towing is always an issue during these big events because the tow truck operators tend to be very busy and very lucrative gigs, towing people out of ditches elsewhere in the county. And we have a very hard time getting them into the city. Now, I think you've all discussed in our various meetings too, a change in the towing rate allowed for these companies when they come in, but I think it is pretty complicated, and I am confident that DPW and the police do work together on developing a strategy, and that depends on the size of the snowfall and the timing and all that kind of stuff. So I think they're both doing the best they can at this point. I think your concerns are still well taken. Do you have anything to add, Chief? DPW is not here to represent themselves.
To your point, that what the mayor said may have impacted why there were banks, that there was discussion about not towing during the first snow emergency. But typically what DPW will do is on a Sunday, they'll declare a parking ban for snow removal limited to downtown, so they can address those specifically. So while for a certain period of time, there are banks where it is difficult to park. It really isn't any fault of the parkee, because we would be having the amber lights on every night of the week, and it doesn't create a very good environment to just keep ticketing and towing. So they try to space it out as best they can, so it's on a Sunday. It's the least obtrusive.
Well, I think I'm talking about after the snowstorm, because they're able to clear the streets during the times when the lights are on, but they need to go back like a day or two later to push the banks back because they don't focus on that initially.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but related to the downtown issues where it seems like the biggest bank issues are for parking.
Maybe it's something you can discuss further in infrastructure or public safety to see if you want to change the protocol on that.
Okay, maybe our next infrastructure meeting, we can talk with Mike and Mike about that.
That would be a
See
good
what they
idea.
think, yep. Okay. Any other new business? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn,
So moved.
and I'll second that.
Counselor Gibb?
Yes,
Counselor Ansel?
Yes.
Mayor Reed?
Yes.
okay, meeting adjourned.
Now begin our work session. I think we've got some important bits of business to do tonight. Anybody like to start off with any
Got it.
extended discussion on any of our agenda items tonight?
Yeah, can we go back to 7G?
7G.
These are just setting the special assessment districts basically based on what they were last year, just from my understanding?
7G, well, this is the entire budget package, isn't it? Your main bit of business for tonight, of which special assessment districts are included as part of that budget package.
Okay.
So it sets out your overall tax levy for property taxes, but there's a few.
Tax levy's not in this. Just the special assessment district could be in this. Tax levy won't come until later because the county does their tax warrant in draft version around December 1st and then finalize it at the end of December. So we won't be able to do a tax warrant until they finalize their tax warrant at the end of December. What's in here is the 2020 budget for all the appropriations, all the operating funds, as well as the SAD revenue. And the SAD revenue is for downtown and for the Oval.
Well, my question is, the SAD, those are the same as last year?
Same.
As far as the numbers I can remember.
Same,
yeah.
exactly.
And there's a chance that that will be modified once the overall plan for parking and parking fees and so forth for the lots is determined. Correct?
I don't know that.
You
Matt-
don't know that?
Matt did
Yes,
say
one of the
that.
recommendations from the parking advisory committee was to, if we move forward and implement a paid parking system downtown, is to or eliminate the special assessment
Right.
district. So there's
But-
pros and cons to both. So.
Because we're not there yet, we can't incorporate that into the budget. Right, gotcha.
Those SAD fees are gonna show up on the property tax bill for the go out roughly the first week of February, last week of January, depending on how fast we can get it together. And they'll all be due for collection by the middle of July. So unless that is revised early on, it's gonna take effect for the whole year next year. Timing is everything.
Isn't that complicated though?
Sure as hell is.
Yeah, so I mean, but what, so in effect, I mean, I hate to, this is a prickly question, you're going to be assessing for the parking, and yet that may be discontinued, right?
If you look at.
And so what do you do with the
budget that we put
assessed,
together
yeah,
for the parking fund, it includes both SAT as well as all the parking revenues
okay,
for the whole year.
so,
And given that you haven't moved to your full alternative parking regime yet, because we haven't begun the development and displaced parking yet, I think the committee, the PPAC has been waiting for that to be more immediate concern before they come up with a final decision. There's still a lot of variables they're juggling, so I would not imagine they would make their recommendation until probably month 4 to month 8 of next year.
of next year, I see.
And remember, the special
Okay.
assessment district isn't only for parking, it's also to maintain
True.
downtown, a higher quality of street cleaning and
Yes,
sidewalk maintenance, et
all right,
cetera.
thank you for that.
I have a question about 7D. Just, Chief Ritter wondering what type of consultation could Heather be doing?
If you're familiar with Heather Silver's position, she was really the main financial officer for the police department. She retired. She'll be retired effectively at the end of the month. So what we had proposed and are trying to realize now is taking 3 positions and making them 2. That means redistributing her job duties into 2 others. So we've gone through a civil service process of, in-title work, but there's a lot of institutional knowledge that might be missed. And it was one of the proposals that Heather had in consultation with the person who's taking up part of her position, is that if she could be available to be able to assist in a retired capacity, so to make sure that we run efficiently until she can essentially see the things that are gonna only come up once a month or twice a month or twice a year. So it's-
I wasn't aware that Heather
Yeah,
submitted her
so
retirement.
that's the reason for this, to retain the experience until it can be delivered to the person taking over.
Makes perfect sense.
And the chief's also partly taking his cue off of success. We've done that elsewhere in the city. As you know, Kelly Kluge returned to continue to help us out with the MLD following her retirement. And I know our building inspector is talking with one of his retired employees to see if they can help us out to maintain that continuity and that expertise at a rate very favorable for the city taxpayers is really, I think, very good for us, but presumably, since they're volunteering to do this, is also good for them too, so it really is a win-win.
Mhm.
I have to be careful on this, as she might have to be paid as an employee.
I think whatever way is
Yeah.
what needs to be, we'll do, but, you know, it
Unless
looks
she
like.
has her own consulting business that she normally, bills from and gives consulting work to other, entities, we'd have to treat her as an employee on the payroll. But that's, it's fine.
Whatever it needs to be, we'll do.
Yep.
I just wanted to ask a question on item E about your proposed crate center turf field rates. Is this, does this satisfy what you had asked, the managers to do to come up with the
Yes.
rates? So this is,
This is what they came up with in collaboration with Director Miller.
I guess my question, the rates for the city stage use and tables and chairs, that includes setup and takedown?
Yes.
Now, how much of a decline in usership, that's a word, do you anticipate with the increased rates?
To be determined, there's gonna be some dissatisfaction, obviously, but, we really won't know until it comes.
In order to get a reasonable expectation of user loss because of a raise in rates, you have to have some historical data to base a model off of. We don't have anything detailed enough to make even a best guess, so it's gonna be largely determined by how people react.
Have the groups that have previously used the facility, soccer and other events, have they been notified that an increase may be coming, or?
I believe some of the folks that are looking to rent the crate for events next year have been. I don't know about indoor soccer.
Nothing in detail for soccer or football usage, but the crate event people have been notified, not exact rates, but it would be going up.
When was the last time these rates were changed?
The field rates, I believe, was.
I think it was prior to 2014.
Yeah,
So if
2013 earlier.
If you look at the increases, compare the turf field rates to the event rates, there are more increases centered on the field rates than on the event rates, because it's been quite a while longer since the turf field rates were raised. The event rates were just raised last year, so we tried to minimize any additional.
And the rates say that it's based per season. Are there, how many games are there per, I guess, how many games would a team typically play per season? And how many seasons are there?
There is about generally 8 games for most leagues. A season is session 1 is November to the end of January. Session 2
So essentially 2 seasons.
So these rates would apply to the second season, since the first season is almost already complete.
Okay.
And just to give council some context for what this means on a per game basis, the full soccer team for a season, that's $625. So there's 10 players per team, so that's about $62.50 per player. Total per game, there's 8 games per season, so it's $782 per game. With the increased rates to $875, that works out to an increase from $782 a game to $10.94 a game, so a little over $3 more per game that they would be paying.
And that will not include any increase in officials' fees or?
No.
But the budget projections, are those based on the same amount of users with the increased rates, or what was taken into account with those?
The budget projections were based on the assumption that we would have a consistent level of usage compared to prior years with the rate hikes. So it did not take into account any potential loss because of user attrition based on the raise in the rates.
I mean, as you recall, this is a variable that we discussed, and you can't entirely predict. You were the first one to raise the possibility that that could be the effect of these rate hikes, right? So
That
it's an
seems very
assumption
logical,
that it was a risk we were willing to take because we knew that we had to cover our costs at the Great Center. That's what this is all about.
This doesn't completely cover all costs though, correct?
No. I mean, operational costs, that was something we clarified early on, that we weren't including, the debt service and so forth, but, and then definitely we need some long-range planning in terms of, what capital investments we're willing to make, if any at all, in the crate in the future. But, it's a tough call. And I know, Justin, you as someone who's worked very hard to build up these programs, the riskiness of it is a difficult kind of thing to entertain. I get it. And I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to try to do this. But, I am encouraged that if you're thinking about investing in your kids' participation in something like indoor soccer, indoor football, $10 a game, I know it adds up, but, if you go to a movie, I don't know what it is for kids, but for seniors, it's something like 10, right? And it's not gonna fall until the end of January, so there is going to be a period of time during which they can, adjust to this change. But once again, I really appreciate it was a tough job to do, and we can't predict the future and what effect it will have, but it was something that I think there was consensus that we needed to do.
I think in looking at it, it does make the figures do make sense, and certainly having been involved in sports and athletics throughout most of my life, and also with my children, it seems reasonable. Unfortunately, you do have to pay to play. It's the way it is. And considering the fact that the participation percentages also include a number of residents outside of the city of Plattsburgh, I think it's a reasonable mark to set, and I'd just like to echo Councilor Armstrong's words and thank you for this. I know it's not easy, it wasn't easy to do, but I think it seems very reasonable.
Justin, are there any other, are there any other changes being proposed, like operational changes, program changes, other than rate changes?
Nothing yet. Some preliminary talks about some things, but nothing set in stone.
To Justin's credit, though, he's always very innovative and always looking at different programs and things and tinkering with things, so.
Well, this, next year, I think will be a kind of transitional year for, you know, we will need to, there will definitely be a need to do some long-range planning and figure out if or whether the idea of a regional complex plays into the conversation, to what degree that will play a role in long-range planning, but it's gonna be exciting as well as a challenge.
I'm sorry, I just had one more question I wanted to go back. I was just wondering was there any consideration given to having a tiered fee structure or rate structure for such as teams that may be comprised of out-of-city residents compared to in-city?
We looked at that a little bit. We wanted to keep it kind of consistent with what we're doing now. So we stuck with pretty much the same procedures down the line. So it seemed to make the most sense.
That's fine. I was just wondering if there was any consideration given to that. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, well, since we do that, I can understand that assumption, since we do that kind of at the oval gym, right, with
Right.
membership fees. Something to think about. I just wondered if everybody had a chance to look at the HR, what is it? Now it fails me, HR 763, that the resolution asks the council to support. Okay. And hopefully, Tim Palmer, who's a member of Citizens Climate Lobby, will be here to make some comments about, you know, how the bill was formulated, how, you know, how the Citizens Lobby Group has worked with members of Congress to try to move it along. And I know that there are efforts just like ours tonight across the nation to move this legislation forward. And I'm hoping that you have considered support for it.
And the nice thing about this for our city's perspective is that this recommends imposing a carbon tax on hydrocarbon fuels, but then all the revenue from that tax is then put back in the hands of consumers as well. Now, given that the city of Plattsburgh is so close to carbon neutral, we'd have a net benefit because we wouldn't be paying a lot of the carbon tax because we use a lot of sustainable fuel or sources of
excellent
energy,
point.
but we'd still get the rebates coming in.
Right.
So this is very attractive for a city of our sort. Any other items you'd like to have a little bit of extended conversation on?
Why not 7A?
7A?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that, Matt? I mean, I understand the words, but maybe not the full ramifications.
Yeah, the city had applied, it was before my time,
Yep.
for an American Battlefield Protection Planning grant from the National Park Service to study several Revolutionary War and War of 1812 era sites in the Plattsburgh area.
I think
Crab
Fort
Island.
Brown's among them.
What's that?
I think the Fort Brown site's among them, right?
Fort Brown, Crab Island, Balfour Island. The grant was to study the current status of the sites as they relate to the various historic registers and whether any of them are worthy of a higher classification, and also to conduct an archaeological study of the various sites to determine where in the vicinity of those sites the greatest value of archaeological examination might be found. So the greatest chance of finding artifacts from the battle. The grant has been completed. The city has been reimbursed for all of the expenses involved with the grant. This is simply a housekeeping matter to have the council formally accept the final report.
I had a question about that. I read through the document that was attached, that you passed along to all of us. I was approached by email several months back by Rod Sherman. And in conjunction with this, he suggested a couple of things in this endeavor to really highlight the history of Plattsburgh. And a couple of suggestions he had, one was to raise the Spitfire, and another one about getting the 1814 ship hull from Whitehall. And I don't know, so that's why I'm asking, is that something that could be done or looked at as part of this?
Well, this just seems to be accepting a document,
Right, but the
adopting a plan.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
represents more of
Battlefield
a
grant.
study and analysis. We certainly could look at additional grant funding that we could use to accomplish those goals, but it would be outside the scope of
It would,
this
okay.
particular project, yeah.
I just thought the scope of what this document talks about, I wondered if this could be looked at in some way. Would that go?
And I've had that conversation with Mr. Chairman too. Just imagine if we could someday have a display for the Spitfire down on our harbor side. I mean, that's probably 20 years away because it's gonna take an awful long time to bring that ship up. I believe that ship is in New York water, so I'd hope would come to this side of the lake and have that as a permanent display, Benedict Arnold's original ship. There's so much history involved, and that could really be the centerpiece of our harbor side. But
Right.
at this point, it's highly speculative because it's gonna be many years before that's going to occur, and an awful lot of things would have to fall in place. But obviously, if that could happen, and maybe as we complete, as you know, we have a CFA application for a harborside plan. Maybe we can make sure that Bug is in their ear as they develop that plan going forward. I think we've got a reasonable chance of receiving that grant. So maybe to be determined, but we should certainly keep that idea going. That would just be a precious resource for Plattsburgh.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic. I think that would.
Any other items you'd like to have a little bit of extended conversation on? What if we do our various reports? You've received in your packet a fair number of reports this week. Any additional reports beginning with council or governance strategy and city operations, Councilor Armstrong?
Yes, I'd just like to remind you that I sent you a copy of the Water Valet Green
Watervliet.
Valet, sorry.
It's my wife's hometown.
Okay, I always wondered about that. I wanted to make it sound French. But anyway, you all received the notes from the Climate Task Force meeting, and thank you, Chief Ritter, for sending your feedback. If you happen to see the message he sent, he actually, what you said reflects exactly my concern about that policy, because there is so much elasticity, we'll say, in the language that it's hard to actually say what the standards are. So, I will bring that back, and I encourage the rest of the department heads to take a look at that green procurement policy and offer some feedback. That policy actually received 3 out of 4 points from Climate Smart Communities, so it fills the bill. But I don't think it does provide enough guidance to department heads about, how to determine what kind of products are the best ones to buy. So, or the most sustainable to invest in. So, that's all I can think about right now.
City infrastructure, Councilor Moore.
I didn't have a lot, but I had a chance with Councilor Kelly to go look at Protection Avenue. It looks really good, and hopefully our whole downtown will continue down that trajectory.
I've never seen a street that has the sidewalks on par with the street like that.
With the
Yeah.
curb?
Yeah. There essentially is no curb. Yeah.
Typically you'd crown the roadway so that the water could clear out of there, but there is nowhere for the water to go, so had to keep it neutral.
Yeah, I'd like to also comment on that. All the years I've lived in Plattsburgh, never have I seen that alley look that nice. It's
Boy, you
just,
used to spend a lot of time in that alley then, huh?
well, you just never mind. I just think it's a huge facelift for the downtown area.
It
And with
is.
everything else going on, with the downtown, with the DRI, I think it's just fantastic.
It is.
And connecting right onto Marion where that beautiful mural is, I mean,
Yes.
it's just,
Yeah.
it's very
Right.
nice.
It no longer looks seedy.
That's all I had this week.
Finance and Budget, Counselor Kelly, this is your day.
Well, the culmination of several months of hard work on the part of the mayor, our department heads, our counselors. We're gonna pass a budget tonight, and I think we've hashed out all the changes, increases and decreases that we'd like to see this year, so I just think 2020 is gonna be a great year financially for the city, as well as many other areas also. So, looking forward to it. That's all I can say. Really looking forward to next year.
Thanks for your leadership, Mike.
Well, thank you, thank you.
Public Safety, Counselor Gibbs.
Well, we had our regular meeting tonight, and this is gonna be our last public safety meeting for this year because Christmas will be at the end of December. So I'm going to, we did talk about more reports and other reports of like trap noodle release and the nuisance animal control officer. I've also been reading the reports that are coming in every week that you've been gathering for us, Chief Ritter. And I would be grateful for the feedback of the council. You can send it to me by email. If there's anything you would like to see change about the reports, because I do have some suggestions. So going into next year, about what those will look like. So if anybody has suggestions, just shoot me an email and let me know what you think. And that's all I have.
Plattsburgh Public Library, Counselor Insel.
Well, the library board is meeting as we speak, so obviously I'm unable to attend.
And MLD Board President, Counselor McFarland.
No updates.
Okay. Any other additional reports anybody would like to issue at this time? Shall we recess then for 4 minutes?
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
I couldn't make it to last week's meeting, I was in Boulder, so I was getting ready to pass it tonight's meeting.
You sure can. Absolutely.
I did watch that.
Okay, okay. Could shoot you that PowerPoint too, if that would help you. I could send you that PowerPoint we used in the meeting last time.
That's one of the disadvantages, you're squinting to see anything.
Let me have your email address.
It's, actually, let me get my card for you.
Oh, okay, okay.
What's different is that I don't have a fax anymore.
Oh, okay.
I got a new phone without a fax.
Just a fax, ma'am, just a fax. Or no fax.
No more fax.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you that, and you're welcome to talk to me after. Okay.
We were looking to go around.
Tim,
I think you're gonna present in about 5 minutes. We have a little.
I told him.
Yep.
That's the first comment period, yeah.
And I jump-started a little bit. And Councilor Armstrong did too. We already in our pre-meet, or our work session, talked a little bit about it and how excited we are. I made the point that since the city of Plattsburgh is so close to being carbon neutral, we would really benefit from this because we get to share in the dividends, but we're not paying all the heating costs and fuel oil costs like everybody else is. So this is a really good thing for the city.
For the 21st district, it would be huge. And done calculations recently.
Thanks for shepherding this.
Yeah. Excellent work, Tim.
One more minute.
Oh my God, I can't believe I'm almost.
You two are the only ones that I've worked with all through.
It's huge.
You're going to still be involved though with all this environmental task force stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna be out of town now, so. You'll have
Not all the time.
remotely. Yeah. It was okay.
Everybody about ready? We'll begin tonight's common council meeting with the pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Counselor Armstrong,
Here.
Counselor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs,
Here.
Counselor Ensel,
Here.
Counselor McFarland,
Present.
Counselor Moore,
Here.
Just a few comments. First of all, thank you all for dressing up. It was a very nice Thanksgiving tradition. Actually, we had a photo taken earlier, but the group is looking very spiffy. You know, we've got a lot of really significant stuff on this agenda tonight, and something that's unusual with this agenda. Often we just do kind of routine things, but there's some really substantial things that we're discussing tonight, and an awful lot of people put an awful lot of work into it. A lot of staff time and imagination. We talked to Justin Gregg at the beginning of this meeting of all the work he put in on the Crate Center fee structure and some of the programs that they're developing. And our planner, Melena Tamer, has something in here as well. And Richard Marks, of course, we're doing the budget tonight. You all participated in that, and Councilor Kelly really shepherded that process through. It's culminating tonight. I know that our legal counsel and our building inspector and a couple of our councils have been spearheading some efforts with livable communities, and that will probably come up tonight as well. And I just want to thank you all for all the really hard work. It's really starting to culminate. These last few meetings are bringing a lot of things together and getting a lot of things done, and not the least of which we'll be hearing from Tim Palmer and Councilor Armstrong's efforts with the Sustainability Task Force in a few moments, and a really important item from that too. So these are some very exciting meetings, and I know for a couple of you, it'll be your last few meetings for the Common Council. We're sure getting a lot of really great work done, and thank you all for that.
resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on November 21st, 2019 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Ansel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending November 27th, 2019 in the amount of $84,042.78 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Only a few more meetings. Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Gibbs. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. You have your reports, and you all offered additional reports from your various committees. Is there any additional reports to be offered at this time? Seeing none, resolve the reports as listed are hereby ordered received, and any written reports are placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office. Moved by Councilor Gibbs, second by Councilor Armstrong. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Oops. No correspondences or recommendations from boards at this time.
Resolved that the bills audited by the common council for the week ending November 29th, 2019, in the amount of $1,396,740.86 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Moore, second by Councilor Kelly. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. This is now an opportunity for any of the members of the public to please come and address the council on any items on the agenda tonight. There will be another public comment period at the end of the meeting as well for other issues of mutual concern. Please be mindful of the 5-minute time limit.
Hi, Steve Krieg, 8 Mason Drive. And I saw in the paper today, in the budget, and I want to comment on the recreation complex. It seems to me that recreation facilities in the city should provide recreation to city residents. And I personally have a hard time seeing how the marina does so. The figures I saw is it was 90% people, at least out of the city, maybe 90% Canadians. So it's hard to see how that actually provides recreation opportunities for people in the city. The other facilities, I know they're difficult. I know there's a lot of things that have to be done to them, and I certainly wish you the best. I know those things are hard to do, and I hope you can get those done. But I wish that something would be done to get that marina out of the city, because it really provides no recreational opportunities. Me, or I believe 99% of the residents in this city. I hope recreation will be looked at as being for city residents, but also mostly for kids in the city, and especially for kids whose parents can't afford to send them to a place where it costs a lot of money for recreation. I think that's the key to making a better world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Palmer. I'd first like to thank the council members for taking the time at this busy season to address the climate crisis by considering endorsement of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, H.R. 763. I speak as group leader and congressional liaison on behalf of Citizens Climate Lobby, and as a parent on behalf of all the children and grandchildren represented in this room. Addressing this crisis must be done on every level, from the daily decisions made by individuals to the policies of nations and coalitions of nations. This act addresses the issue at every level by including the environmental cost of burning carbon fuels in their price. Revenues are collected where fossil fuels enter the economy, at the mine, wellhead, and port, and are all returned as a monthly dividend in equal shares to every resident of the United States. The dividend provides those in the lower 2/3 of the economic spectrum with more money from the dividend than the additional costs they incur due to the increase in the price of fuels. A border adjustment encourages other nations to do the same while protecting the competitiveness of American companies. This act, as written, will reduce emissions by 40% by 2030 and 90% by 2050. My wife and I have actually met on Capitol Hill with dozens of senators, representatives, and their staffs to lobby for this bill. At the present time, we have 70 co-sponsors, but only one Republican. We believe that addressing climate concerns effectively and for the long term requires bipartisan support. With that goal in mind, our chapter first met with Elise Stefanik's legislative director in June of 2015. Since then, we have met with our congresswoman many times, and she has responded by growing from resistance to actually adopting public leadership on climate for her party in the House. On the 8th of November, for example, she continued this trend by co-sponsoring the BEST Act, which supports development of storage capacity and upgrading of the electrical grid to better accommodate renewable sources of energy. However, the growing bipartisan divide in DC makes it critical for elected leaders on Capitol Hill to know that they have constituent support for the climate action embodied in HR 763. One way to do this is for elected representatives at the local level to make that clear by endorsing this legislation. I believe you represent about 20,000 people, and I hope you will send this important message of support for putting a price on carbon to our elected representatives in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Any other members like to please come and address the council on issues on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, please continue.
Whereas the city of Plattsburgh received an American Battlefield Protection Program grant.
Beth, I'll waive a reading and move to resolution, please.
Moved by Councilor McFarland, second by Councilor Rensselaer. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion on the item itself? And thank you for the elaboration, Mr. Melvin. Seeing none, roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yeah.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the resolution in support of Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2019, HR 763, the entire text of which has been distributed to the members of the Common Council and will be made part of the minutes of this meeting.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor McFarland. Discussion.
I'd like to just kind of reinforce the message that Mr. Palmer delivered to us. I don't believe that the crisis that we face gets enough media coverage, gets enough discussion in public forums, and so I want to add to that discussion just by reading a hopefully brief statement. This evening, the Common Council will adopt its 2020 budget, approving expenditures for services that will promote the health, well-being, and safety of our residents. With this vote, we both build and maintain our city so that future generations can survive and prosper. As councilors, though many of our decisions deal with current local circumstances, we must also be mindful of how our future is impacted by federal and state policies and laws. For this reason, Earth Day 2015, the Plattsburgh Common Council, and the mayor was part of the legislature at that time, and he joined with the Clinton County Oil Train Task Force, and we organized 7 boards of Clinton County municipalities urging federal agencies to upgrade safety standards for oil train tankers that wind through the North Country. The council was responding to the alarming number of oil train accidents across the country and Canada. Though jurisdiction over the oil tanker safety rules did not lie with any of these municipalities, city and town boards knew that in order to protect their citizens, they needed to voice their grave concerns about the matter. These and similar actions nationwide led to safety improvements designed to prevent accidents in the transport of crude oil by rail. After Earth Day 2019, because we recognize that the climate crisis threatens our collective future, a future in which all life on Earth is inextricably intertwined, the Plattsburgh Common Council took another crucial step to protect its citizens. By becoming a New York State climate smart community, the city has made a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in city operations. As further acknowledgement of the climate emergency we face, this evening I ask that the council join with the town of Plattsburgh and other municipalities across the nation to support federal legislation that will put our nation on track to reduce fossil fuel consumption and transition to renewable energy sources. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2019, H.R. 763, is a vital step in mitigating the serious impacts driven by greenhouse gases created by the burning of fossil fuels. It would provide a steadily increasing fee or tax on fossil fuels at their point of entry into the economy. This makes use of free market mechanisms to promote the transition to greater energy conservation and renewable sources of energy. Since the cost of fossil fuels will go up, all revenue generated by the fee or tax would be rebated to all United States residents in equal shares. This will not only neutralize the impact of rising energy prices, it will also generate many new clean energy jobs. In a September op-ed on the Tucson Sentinel, Raymond Pierre Humbert, the lead author of the 2018 United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, wrote, "With regard to the climate crisis, yes, it's time to panic. It is our duty as a municipal body to confront our fear about this existential threat, because bold action is needed to respond to this planetary emergency. I urge my fellow council members to pass this resolution in support of H.R. 763. By doing so, we continue to act according to our established tradition of advocacy for a sustainable future."
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mayor, Councilor Armstrong, I'd like to thank you for your ongoing efforts in the environmental realm over the past, all the years I've known you, I guess. And you've helped us in so many ways to make the global issues, and I think global warming is the biggest of the global issues. You brought those home for us and helped us understand how we can make change here in our own communities, and I really appreciate that. I hope you'll keep up the good work when you're no longer on the council, and hope we get to see you often. So thank you.
That would be my pleasure.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves the city chamberlain to adjust the 2019 water and sewer budgets for $11,000 and $30,000 respectively for appropriations transfers to provide for water and sewer contract office labor and sewer repairs.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, seconded by Councilor Ansel. Discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the common council approves that the mayor is authorized to sign a consulting agreement with Heather Silver for the police department from December 1st, 2019 to May 31st, 2020. The total cost will be as follows: December 1st, 2019 through February 28th, 2020, $250 per week. March 1st, 2020 through May 31st, 2020, $75 per week for limited on-call availability.
Moved by Councilor Gibbs, seconded by Councilor McFarland. Discussion?
And thank you for that explanation, Chief Ritter.
Thank you, Chief.
Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with
I'd
the
like to
request.
waive the reading and move the motion.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, seconded by Councilor McFarland. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Discussion on the item itself?
We had discussed earlier in our work session at some length about the proposed fee changes for the Crate Center. And I know I had asked about if any consideration was given to having a tiered fee structure between city residents and those residents who live outside the city who participate. And I appreciate the fact that that was considered, and I certainly understand your reasoning behind keeping the fee structure set up the way it is. And once again, I'd like to thank you for all your efforts that you put into this. Again, I know it wasn't easy, but I think it's what needs to be done. Thank you.
Justin, do any local businesses sponsor teams?
There are a lot of businesses that do sponsor soccer teams.
Any further discussion?
Actually, I do have one question, I'm sorry. I see on the rate structure, Justin, that the crate is used for adult football. There's no youth football like Pop Warner, and
There is youth football.
there is youth football in there?
That goes under the individual registration down below, city and non-city.
Okay,
They sign up that individually.
okay, and that's flag indoors?
Yeah.
And you do have a differential rate to slightly favor the city residents there as well?
Yes.
Okay, that is differentiated rates with?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Renzel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Motion to adopt common council proposed 2020 budget last revised, and we need to change the date to November 26, 2019. This is today.
First from Councillor Gibbs as amended, second Councillor Moore. Discussion?
We've been discussing it for several weeks now. So, enough said.
It's a
The discussion's
culmination.
worth it. I'm so proud of what we've done as a council this year.
The committees really came together and really helped this document significantly.
And not just, the fiscal part of it, but we've accomplished a lot. You already said this in your opening comments. We've accomplished a lot this year. And I'm very proud of everything we've done as a council this year.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Renzel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yeah.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
A resolution making appropriations for the
Beth,
fiscal
I'd like to
year-
waive a reading and move to resolution, please.
Moved by Councillor McFarland, second by Councillor Gibbs. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Discussion on the item itself? Again, you had extensive discussion on this in the
Right.
work session. Seeing none, roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Renzel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Councillor Moore, you have the floor, Councillor Renzel.
Yes, at this time, as you know, Councilor Moore and I spent a considerable amount of time meeting with the Community Livability Committee, and we did hear from a number of the committee members here in chambers, and some of the suggestions that they asked this body to take. Tonight, I'd like to introduce local law P6 of 2019, a local law adding section 144-18 rental permits to chapter 144 of the Building Code, Administration and Enforcement, to the city code for the city of Plattsburgh. Essentially, what this will do will set up a rental registry within the city that will run through the building inspector's office and will provide some guidelines for landlords to uphold, and we'll set forward a schedule of inspections that I think will help improve conditions.
Yes, I think this will go a long ways towards providing for safety and living conditions, and it's well overdue.
So at this point, I'd like to schedule a public meeting to hear comments on the local law.
We'll set that for Thursday, December 12th at 5 PM, and a copy of the proposed local law has been provided to all the councilors. Are there any travel requests at this time? Resolutions for initial consideration, I see one. Request from the City Chamberlain to consider the comparison of 4 respondent proposals to the city's banking services RFP to choose a bank to provide services for the city from January 1, 2020 through December 31st, 2024. And will that come up again next week, I presume, with initial consideration?
Get the comparison 3/4 of the way done, so maybe by tomorrow, worst case Monday, so that you have a chance to look at it for making a decision on December 6th.
Thank you. Any other items for initial consideration? Any new business or additional council reports? We'll close then tonight with any additional closing public comments on any subject of mutual concern.
Because of our emphasis on bipartisanship, it's particularly notable that you've all voted unanimously to support HR 763. I thank you on behalf of all future and present generations.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
You're welcome. Any other individuals like to please come forward? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Ansel. Roll call?
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Gibbs?
Yes.
Counselor Ansel?
Yes.
Counselor McFarland?
Yes.
Counselor Moore?
Yes.
Thank you all for coming.
Nice Thanksgiving, everyone.
Quite a packed last few meetings, huh?
Yeah, I'll say.
Oh, good.
I'll do what I can. Oh, I might be on, like last week of our vacation. Yeah, that's the last week of our vacation. Yeah, maybe. I'll try. They really have.